Well, vaccinated travelers arriving at Pearson Airport are no longer being subjected to random testing, and the tourism minister told CTV News that the federal government expects to fix airport delays in the coming weeks.
The U.S. has lifted the negative COVID-19 test requirement for air travelers. But for more on the current situation at Pearson and whether these changes have had any impact, we're joined live by Tori Gass from the Greater Toronto Airports Authority. Tori, good afternoon to you. We were speaking during the break, and I asked you whether the situation improved a bit, and you said a little bit. So please fill us in on what's happening there today.
Well, this past weekend was the first one with this change, the pause to the random testing. So we've only got a couple of days to gauge it by, but we did see some improvement. There was some better flow for our international arrivals, which is where we've really been seeing some bottlenecks piling up. Passengers have been spending time waiting on planes and then going through customs. So we can say that it has made a little bit of improvement. We've seen some staffing added as well. So the government is making some changes that way. So things are looking up, and we're looking positive towards the summer season, which is going to really heat up in the next couple of weeks, and that's going to be the test of when we get really busy.
Absolutely. So, Tori, let's talk about, has your guidance changed at all for passengers who will be traveling either to Toronto or out of Toronto, over the next coming weeks? Typically, if you're taking an international flight, the advice is arrive 3 hours before, 2 hours for domestic, that sort of thing. Has any of that changed at this point?
We're still sticking with the same advice to passengers. So if you're traveling domestically within Canada, please arrive 2 hours ahead of your flight. If you're flying international, that's 3 hours. Now, the wait times are going to vary throughout the day. That just depends on flight schedules. There are some peak times when we've got more flights coming and going, but generally that is the advice to passengers. We will also say that, when you're departing, please be ready to go through security. There's lots of tips that CATSA has on what can go into carry-on, and that's something that you can do to kind of speed your way up. And then when you're landing here, if you're coming from somewhere international, you need to really be getting that ArriveCAN app. So the ArriveCAN app is the next thing that we think we need to tackle. The government agrees with us that there's health checks involved on that we need to be streamlining those, and that could help speed up that bottleneck for passengers again. So we really just want to advise passengers that if you're coming from somewhere international, make sure you have your ArriveCAN app, just like you would your passport. If you're leaving the country, add it to your checklist.
Right, and Tori, when we were speaking to experts, I believe it was last week, they said that these delays could last well into late August. But now the federal government is saying we're working on it, help is on the way. In the coming weeks, things should get better. Have they already hired some of those 600 employees that they said they would hire and open up some of those 300 counters?
Well, we do know that there has been added staff, and we are starting to see that on the ground here, that we are seeing improvements both for departures and a little bit with arrivals. Like we said this past weekend, there has been a bit of improvement. So we are optimistic, but more needs to be done. We know we need to make more changes so that we can be ready for this influx of summer travelers that we're really going to be seeing. So right now it's starting to get busy, but really when school lets out, that's when summer travel is really going to peak. So we've got to be prepared for that. There's more that has to be done. We're looking towards the government to make more changes, but we're working together, and we're confident that things are going to be a little bit better for passengers in the coming weeks.
And Tori, last week, let's call that the peak of the sort of outrage, generated towards the airports. We had, Mayor John Tory calling the situation unacceptable. We had a former NHLer turned podcaster, Ryan Whitney, really sort of savaging the airport. How difficult has it been reputationally to manage through this?
Well, we don't like to see these things either. So when we were hearing these words coming from other politicians and from passengers, whether it's Ryan Whitney or any other passengers, it's not something that we want to be seeing. And I will say that our staff that are here on the ground, we are seeing this firsthand as well. And we've lived this through the entire pandemic. So it's not something that we like to see. It's not an experience that we want our passengers to have. We want to be able to get them moving smoothly. It's just that with the restart of travel, there were some issues with a lot of staffing. There are these health checks that are still involved. So it's not easy to be coming to Pearson every day and seeing this, but we know that our staff here are rallying, and we've just been seeing them really trying to support our passengers. We've been trying to support CATSA, CVSA in any way that we can. So we know that the experience hasn't been smooth, and we're really hopeful that with the steps that the government is taking, that things will improve in the coming weeks.
Okay, fingers crossed. Tori Gass from the Greater Toronto Airports Authority, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Tori.